I'm Charlotte McLeod with the Investing News Network, and here today with me is Andrew O'Donnell, founder of Market Mindset. Thank you so much for being here in person with me.
It's great to see you again. Yes, it's always a pleasure, and it's great to see you in person.
Yes, it's super nice. We're here at VRIC. It's the first day of the show, and I think that the recent market volatility is really top of mind for everyone. There's been a little bit of stabilization, I think, but people are feeling wary. So how long do you think we're going to be facing this?
Yeah, so I'm not as optimistic as some might be. I'm hopeful, but I think that there's, and even my talk was focusing on a lot of negative that's still out there. There's a lot of bad news, there's a lot of chaos, and there's not a lot of strong messaging as to how to get out of things. But what we want to do is find some of those real diamonds in the rough. So really strong stocks with management teams that will excel even in troubling times. And that's why I think it's really a stock picker's market. I said that 2 years ago, but it really is now narrowing down into those management teams and those companies that have considered supply chain issues, inflation. They've considered that already, and they've mitigated those risks as best they can. And that's what we really try to focus on.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask how you're handling these fluctuations yourself. Are you standing back and weathering the storm? Are you making in portfolio adjustments? How are you doing?
We made some adjustments back August, September. So we decided, because we started focusing a bit more on food shortage, so we picked up some fertilizer companies, which did exceptionally well. It's kind of part of what we were talking about too, is there is a food shortage issue. It's been since 2008 that anyone was talking about like potash or anything like that. It's not a big theme, but we like to remind people, food is the most important thing out there for people. And although we won't necessarily see the food shortages here, like we see the lines are a bit different, or what's on the list, on the grocery shelves are a bit different. They're not as abundant, but where you're really going to see this is in some of the developing nations. And this is even before Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe, but also the breadbasket to a lot of Middle Eastern countries.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about food shortage, right, and how to get exposure to that, because it is something that I'm starting to hear a little bit more about. You were mentioning, I think, potash phosphate.
Yeah, so there's three different things that you kind of look at. There's ammonia, there's phosphate, and there's also nitrogen. There's a lot of things that go into it, but we like potash, so that's part. And you'll remember there's Saskatchewan Potash, which is now Nutrien. Mm-hmm. So Nutrien is a major player, and Mosaic is a major player in this space. And they've simmered down a bit in the last few months, as everyone has in the last few months. But they did well in the last 6 months. Pretty big returns for big companies. We also really liked a company out of Brazil called Verde Agritech, and that did exceptionally well. And then, of course, we've got a company here in Canada, which we like, but it's got a big sticker price to actually develop, but it's Arion phosphate, but it is high-grade phosphate. It is, there's lots of check marks that's really attractive, but it's going to take about $1 billion to get that thing going, which I think some people go, whoa, that's a big project. But it is profitable. Brian Ostroff over there does a great job. He's on our show quite a bit. He helps to educate our viewers on that space and on that market. And there's also some functionality to it too, because you can actually use this high-grade phosphate in batteries as well. So he prefers focusing on food. Let's feed people first. But that's where we kind of see, if you're putting your money to work against some of these serious issues, you're going to be faced with the question of, is it okay to profit off of misfortune? But I look at it and go, no, we want to place our money and solve these problems. And that's kind of our focus.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for going through that with us. So you have spoken today here at VRIC. You were focusing on securing supply lines, which is definitely a topic that's attracting attention, as you've gone over with the food shortages. That's part of it. I wasn't able to see the talk, but I wondered if you could go over where do you think we're seeing the most supply line strain in the resource sector?
If you're shipping anything, you're in trouble. That's really, if you're going to a port to port, that's a big issue. So this is where I think a lot of, say in particular, North American projects that are very niche and unique, if you can get vertically integrated, where you can get from ground to end user, and it's closer, that's amazing. Also, and not to be resource nationalistic, I think there's an issue, and people are coming to terms with that China has so much of a stockpile that's not a great place to be if you're every other country. That message is clear in Australia. They get it. It's getting a bit clearer now in the US and Canada. And certainly the Defense Act from Biden, that helps. And we've got a bit of acknowledgement from Chrystia Freeland, putting $2 billion towards battery energy metals and whatnot. So we're seeing a shift, but we need to see a much bigger shift. And I think if we fund projects in our backyard, where we have control, we have high levels of regulation, that's far better off than we're leaving it to someone else's control and the market to, say, a China.
Right. I was going to ask you about resource nationalism, so I'm glad you brought that up. The other thing I wanted to focus on, so we're talking about government support for these projects within their borders, right? Great to have, but governments do move so slowly.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that a little bit? What else do we need?
Yes. No, I mean, I'd much prefer if they just exited this situation and allow capital to go in. But we unfortunately live in the West, where we've been kind of force-fed that all mining's bad, all energy is bad, yet they are not providing a solution. We can't use fossil fuels. We can't go to use uranium. We can't use, all you hear is the no, 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 no. But if you ask them, well, where's this energy going to come from? They won't be able to tell you. There's no roadmap. And this unintended consequences is what you see in Europe with energy shortages as well as fertilizer issue, because some of those analysts have been saying they haven't been quiet for the last few years, warning people this was coming. So these issues were already happening before, which made it much worse, Putin invading Ukraine, which has also kind of taken this whole globalist plan of we're all in this together, we're all going to unite and work together. That's put that way off the map. And focusing on now these supply chains that can't come from Belarus, from Chechnya, from Russia, any of the ammonia, any of the wheat from Ukraine, all of that, that's not moving now. And even helium coming from Russia, one of their plants burnt down before this all happened. There's a lot of very strange things happening that I think people aren't paying attention to as much, but also when they do, it gets thrown in that conspiracy world because there's lots of weirdness happening. And when there isn't strong leadership, there's chaos.
Right. And okay, so you're talking about, ways to use your money, not to profit off of bad things, but to, help the world along. So agriculture is one way. You mentioned helium. Where else are you seeing these opportunities? Yeah.
So, I mean, the mining, all of mining, I mean, all those battery metals, lithium, we love the lithium story because, something like, direct lithium extraction. So a technology play, but looking at the mining sector, whereas can we go into a lot of these oil and gas wells in Alberta, say like a lithium bank that has massive amounts of property, can we go in there and get that brine out? And if they come up with a great PEA with a large number, then Alberta then also, once again becomes a major energy player, and not because they're going to be a major energy player in the short term because of oil and gas again, because of the unintended consequences, but it shows this shift towards what all these politicians say they want to do, but it's a practical shift where we're actually applying money to this issue and we can be the resource country that we want to be. Copper as well, copper, awesome. So, we're big fans of copper. What I like to throw out companies because I am a stock picker and people always get mad if I don't mention them. So I will say Faraday Copper. I mean, this is, so Gianni Kovacevic, who's the founder, who's done a great job over at Copper Bank. They did the name change. They've attracted some incredible management. I think we're going to see some interesting things out of that company this summer. And once again, we like projects that are in North America that can feed that North American system. And also, if the Biden Act, that level of money gets applied to actually building out infrastructure, there's going to be users. There's going to be material. There's going to be users to be able to use that material, and you're not going to have to ship it at 400% costs on shipping containers.
Okay. So we've talked about, kind of this future trends, things that people can look at. The other theme right now, we started off talking about volatility in the market. I think the other thing that's on people's minds is safety, right? So where do you go for safety?
Yes, I mean, safety right now, it's tough. We've taken a huge hit. I mean, I've kind of been very strongly opposed to FANG stocks for a couple of years now. So they're down about 60%. And to me, that is going to drag down everybody. So, and it has. I mean, even strong management teams with great projects have been pulled back. I think some people have been just sold to sit on the sidelines and wait. The natural inclination is to sit in US dollar. Now, one would think, why am I owning US dollars? They just printed trillions of dollars. They've caused this inflation, but where else were we going to put it? There was hopefully this thought that maybe it was crypto, but that's been totally destroyed. And also the gold market is kind of staying at 1800 levels, and you would have thought that would have risen up. So this is a very strange time, to say the least, where it's hard to understand what's happening to take in all of these events. So to even guess what can happen next is hard to. But we look to go, listen, at the end of the day, we know that there's a push with major players, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, Vanguard, World Economic Forum. They're saying this is the road they're going to go. Is it tomorrow? Is it 2 months, 6 months, a year? I don't know, but it's going to be led by solving big issues in the world. So fertilizer is going to play a role. The battery energy metal story shifting. Is it going to be part hydrogen? I don't know, but all these big themes, I think if you start positioning yourself and looking at individual stocks and not relying so heavily on the ETFs and just general market, passive investing, might give you a bit better return.
Okay, so we have covered quite a lot of ground actually in this short conversation. Did you have any final thoughts or words of advice that you would leave people with in these times?
You know what? It's tough, and I mean, it's to say otherwise is silly. But I mean, we are in a massive chaotic period of time, and there's a lot of things happening and shifting. And I always liken it to any other major historical point in time. If you look at the Great Depression in the Roaring '20s, even during the Great Depression, there was lots of people who did exceptionally well. And we look at the U.S., it's doing very poorly right now. I mean, you have the wealth being shifted up. There's tons of people that made enormous amounts of money in the past 2 years. But you looked at most cities, not so great. They were really hurt. And I think that we have to put on a pair of realistic glasses, but also be optimistic that some of these companies that are going to lead the way to this next rush forward, they have exceptional opportunity to change the way we live, the way we work, the way we interact. And I think once we get through this awkward transition, then that will be the hope and also the growth that we're all waiting for.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to go through all these things with us. Great to see you once again.
Great to see you, and I really appreciate you taking the time. So enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah, you too. And once again, I'm Charlotte McLeod with the Investing East Network, and this is Andrew O'Donnell with Market Mindset.